I like that.
So we don't have a name, we don't have artwork. So I'm thinking, we should just start talking and then like, and we'll find it. But the thing is like, okay, where do you want to start? Like,
Like maybe we share um each bits and pieces of each of our health journey, how we came to where we are now. We got to relate,
mhm,
right? Like, because instantly, if somebody's going to be a health expert, I want to know what makes them an expert and why their title is warranted. I
mm,
want another story,
yeah,
not just like what they do, how they got there, what
yeah.
was the health journey there. So I think it's important. Maybe we ask each other those questions.
I'm actually curious to ask you some of these questions. So first of all, so Kahiki, tell us like what you do right now. What is your title? What do you do? Who do you help? Tell us about that.
So my title is I'm a certified integrative nutritionist and health coach. So I usually get the clients that have an imbalance in some way, shape, or form. It's not usually somebody just wanting to lose weight. Their health has been knocked out of balance long enough to where they're needing additional guidance and support. And in the integrative part is we mostly use nutrition as medicine. And as I'll tell clients, that is their number one medicine, and it is administered at least 3 times a day. It's our most powerful medicine. And I know you get that. That's why we collaborate so much. So that's why I love nutrition so much. But then in addition, there are other therapies that can support that healing process, which I introduce clients to as well. So that's the title. Those are the people I serve. But you essentially do the same thing too, right, Andrea? Who are your people and what's your official title?
I have been playing around with my title a little bit lately. For the longest time, I've called myself a personal chef. Sometimes I say health supportive chef. My focus has always been on cooking for people and helping people eat better so that they feel better, right? I'm not the typical chef who just makes any old food. I don't just fill the fridge with anything. I specifically target whether it's someone with a food allergy or going through a healing crisis. So I'm extremely tailored to creating food that supports that person's health. And same thing, people find me because they don't feel good and they've gone through so many other avenues and they don't get a diagnosis, or the diagnosis from their doctor doesn't seem right, or they finally try to like, I'm going to just try cutting out dairy, and they go, oh my God, I had no idea. Like that feels good, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
or they have an autoimmune, or they're going through cancer, or they're going through a big surgery. So yeah, those are my people.
It's interesting is, and this is truly why I believe our paths crossed. And by the way, for anybody listening, Andrea and I met at Be Healthy Utah, a convention that's held, a big health convention held here in Utah. And we both did food demos back to back. And our people that we serve are very similar.
Mhm.
And the cool thing is I teach the nutrition and I write the meal plans. Andrea's executing it. So one of these times, I would love to see you in your environment and these foods. It's so much better when we collaborate, and it's not as fun when I'm just up there talking.
Yeah.
It's I mean it's better to eat, period, right?
Yeah.
But Andrea's foods and all the colors, and then you're eating the things that I'm talking about. You get to put it into action, but you hit something that was worth pointing out, and when we both go into the integrative world. And when we go integrative, that means it is individualized and
Hmm.
it's customized. And that is a belief you and I share that is important to highlight here too, is that we both feel that health should be customized to your unique needs.
Yeah.
We all have unique biology and unique lifestyles, and it needs to be honored. And I've said so many times that I'm not an advocate of diets. The best diet is first a diet from unloving thoughts, and second, the diet that best supports your unique biology, lifestyle, and mental health. It includes all of it.
Yeah.
So I feel like we share that, and that's how we naturally kind of gravitated towards each other.
Well, I'm wondering, I don't know if I've heard this exact story, but what made you go to school to go become a nutritionist? Like, where did that come from, and what were you doing, before?
I didn't go to school to become a nutritionist at first. At first, it was to be a nurse, and it was year 3 into nursing, and I was shadowing nurses in a hospital environment. And first, I need to say I am grateful for the service that nurses do. I do see that as very um, giving service and kind service, because it is, you're serving. I acknowledge that. However, for me personally, I knew it wasn't going to be a good fit for me long term, because I always saw myself on the other side of health, meaning more proactive, preventative side. And when I was shadowing nurses, I realized I was on the reactive side. And I thought that's not sitting right with me authentically, because I wanted to prevent people from getting there. And if they had gotten there, I want to have more say in their healing.
Yeah.
I needed more than medicine. And I knew that the medicine being administered was not healing per se. Necessary sometimes, maybe, but healing is food. That's nutrition. So I knew my love, by the way, if when I really did some self-reflecting, because it was year 3, that's a lot of money, and I paid for my school. And I knew that was going to be a big jump. And it's like, do I really throw away all that money? And during that self-reflecting, it's like, what do I really love? What can I see myself doing? And I encourage people to do this anyway. Notice the things you gravitate to. What things do you make time for when you don't have time? That's not an accident, that's a calling. Pay attention to that. And so even when I was working in high-tech companies, and I was being paid well, but I was working crazy hours, and I was so stressed. And even then, I made time to study nutrition. And in high school, if I go even further back, in high school, I gravitated to things like biology. I loved topics like that and subjects like that. And I tutored people in those subjects. And it's like, oh, as I got older and I connected those dots, it's like, I'm supposed to be in nutrition, and made the switch in school. And luckily, a lot of those classes carried over, but some didn't. And it's okay, because I don't regret the decision now. So that's what happened. It was, it was a meant to be accident. I don't believe that it was really an accident per se. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for my nursing background. It helps me understand a lot of what my clients have gone through before I get them. So it served me, and it helps me better serve my clients. But same question to you is, how did you come to being where you are now? What's your history with food and nutrition when
Yeah.
you fell in love with it?
Uh, Mine goes back to about uh 2002, where I personally was just going through so many little health issues. And like, I thought that I had arthritis, like all my joints hurt. I was really overweight, and headaches every day. And I realized that, like, I had Excedrin in my purse no matter where I went, like,
Mhm.
and the headaches were daily. And I started going, to my doctor, like, something's wrong. And like, nope, everything's fine. You just need to exercise and eat better. And I'm like, this seems so beyond my control. I was in my 30s. And finally, gosh, I will be forever thankful to this girl. I went for a facial, and my cheeks used to be bright red, bright, bright, bright red. And she looked at my skin and said, have you ever looked at food allergies? Because she knew, like, it wasn't she was, an esthetician. It wasn't the condition of my skin, it was from inside. And I'm like, no, what are those? back then, what are those?
Yeah,
And so she goes,
2002.
I have a nutritionist you should go see. And so I did. And that woman said, gluten, dairy, and by the way, 20 other foods you really need to stop eating right now. And I was willing to do anything just because I felt so miserable. And so I went off of all these foods and like everything changed. Like within a week, the headaches were gone. Within a month, like I had lost 40 pounds without trying. And my joints stopped hurting. Everything got
Wow.
better. And people didn't recognize me going down the halls of my work because like I was losing weight so fast because clearly my body was reacting to gluten and a million other things because I was so toxic. And that just completely opened my eyes to like the power of food because that wasn't being talked about. And I mean, like you, I kind of had some inklings before. I loved food. When my mom went through her cancer diagnosis, we started looking at alternative therapies, but like it just kind of got lost in the noise. And I started just anywhere I could learning about nutrition, learning about food. And I went to IIN in New York. And then through IIN, I learned about this culinary school in New York City called the Natural Gourmet. And I
Ooh.
just thought to myself, and I heard the founder speak at a conference, and I was like, whatever I can do, I need to go learn from her. And I didn't know, like at the time, like, I had a car payment, I had a good job, I had a 401k. Like, none of it seemed possible at the time. But I'm like, I'll figure this out. And it took me 3 years to finally decide it was okay to quit my job, that it was
Wow.
okay to make this change. And I moved to New York City and went to culinary school. But I knew right from the very beginning, I was never going to be a restaurant chef. I was never going to cook regular food. It was all going to be about health and wellness. So, I mean, that's, 15, 17 years ago. And so it's always been about helping people go through what I went through.
Yeah. Heal.
And if there's a food component, and I know this is such a big piece that you and I both believe, and because we've seen it over and over with people, if you're having symptoms and a change in your diet can make those symptoms lessen, why wouldn't you try it? And let's figure out what those foods are. Right?
Yeah.
Because I have a headache, I could take an aspirin. I'm sneezing, I could take an antihistamine. I've got joint pain, I could rub some cream on it. Okay, like those are quick fixes, but it doesn't solve the root problem. So yeah, I mean, my
Yeah.
own personal journey, right, has got me here.
Yeah. You reminded me of a quote from Dr. Stacy I recently came across, which is, do you want to take a pill forever for the symptom, or do you want to change the lifestyle factor, the root cause, and correct the issue or the problem forever and be done with pills? What I like about your story though is that your symptoms were almost dismissed by a doctor, which happens a lot. And I'm not saying all doctors are bad, or I'm not that person. It's their training is not their fault, first of all. There are some great doctors out there that really get it. But more often than not, a lot of them are drinking the same Kool-Aid, and they're trained to diagnose and prescribe. Um, but what I like about your story is that even though your symptoms were almost dismissed, and not validated, you know your body. You knew something was off, and you almost had to figure it out on your own. That's when I usually get clients,
Mm,
or they've tried the whole Western medicine approach and nothing healed it, which again, medicine doesn't heal. It can help symptoms, doesn't heal. So then I finally get them after they've been through the ringer, right? And then we finally get to do the nutrition part of it. And that's where we start to see some change, because it's anti-inflammatory and healing like you experienced. So I thought that was really cool that you mentioned that, because I know that's validating for a lot of people listening to hear.
yeah,
Because I know that you're speaking a lot of people's truths by saying that.
yeah. Absolutely. And with every drug we take, there's a cost to it. And there is a place for medicine. There's a place for all of that. And it's up to people to choose what's right for them. I mean, that kind of seems, especially with what I'm facing now. I realize I just kind of told a story of being overweight and then, losing weight and kind of getting into my right body. And now, as a 53-year-old woman, the weight has just come right back on. Because back in the day, I was 240 pounds. I'm only 5'3", and I got down to 180. Now that I've entered my 50s, man, my trajectory is going right back there, but it's for different reasons. It's because of menopause, it's because of hormones. And so it's hard to tell that story I just told you
Mm.
because my weight is no longer down there, but it's for all these other reasons. But it's interesting to be back in a place where people aren't listening, where it's dismissed. Menopause is a whole nother area that you and I have, a shared interest in, and we really are going to dive into more with people and with our communities of how do you get listened to? How do you trust what you're hearing inside you that is wrong and you need help with versus what conventional medicine tells us
Yes.
we should do?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that's worth its own episode.
Yeah, that absolutely will be. Um, Kahiki, with the people that come to you, is there anything in common with them, like similar things you see either that they're struggling with or on the flip side that help them? So maybe the first one first. Is there anything in common?
Couple things in common. On a physical note, it would be they all have some level of inflammation going on in their body. So the meal plans that I build and the foods that they're focusing on are all anti-inflammatory. A lot of the foods that you mentioned that you removed from your diet are removed from theirs. But it's not, I never want them to see it as deprivation. I explain this to them because it's not, we're removing foods per se, which we do, but we're bringing in so many more loving, healing foods, vibrant energy foods than we are the amount of foods we're removing. So that's how I want them to see it. It's a matter of bringing in loving foods and removing the few unloving foods. So inflammation is one. On a psychological note, it would be the relationship with food isn't always loving, and it's not always their fault. And that's getting a little bit deeper, but I think it's worth mentioning because health is mind and body.
Yeah.
Sometimes it needs to be talked about with clients. And if I go into their health history and we find out what was demonstrated to them as far as relationship with food goes, and I hear about their parents having an unhealthy relationship with food, and that can mean a parent that had a poor body image and constantly dieted and didn't trust themselves with food, and they're seeing that, right? That's where their relationship with food started and began to build. That's their foundation. So, and then they're not being taught. What I'm saying is, then they're not being taught to have a healthy relationship with food.
Mhm.
It was just never demonstrated, and that's for a lot of us. So we're actually doing two things. I'm not just building a meal plan and teaching them what loving foods are and foods that love their bodies back, and it's anti-inflammatory foods, but I'm also hoping that to rebuild or even build a relationship between them and food, and that it can be a healthy and loving one.
Yeah, and I know you have an emphasis and a deep interest in psychology. And when it comes to food, it's not just food. It
Never.
really isn't. And I was just having this conversation with a friend about when we know the right things to do for ourselves, why don't we do them? And especially when it comes to food, there are so many things we wrap up into it. You just said one, it's what we were shown by our parents, or it's the thing we use to comfort ourselves. So
Yeah.
it can be emotional, it can be a physical craving, it can be habit. Like there's so many things that go into eating the things that we know make us feel better, but
Yep.
why am I not doing it? Why is this so hard to make that change?
Yeah. It's, and this is another reason I don't love diets,
Mm,
because it's not addressing this part, right? Of
yeah.
where change needs to happen. And it's not loving to the mind. Because it's diets are deprivation focused. And it's also teaching us you can't be trusted. So here are some rules and guidelines. And it is good to have to eat within a healthy range of certain things, right? That's not what I'm saying. But to be so strict and restrictive, and my minor was psychology, and that's worth noting. So that's why those two are so closely intertwined for me. Anytime something's so restrictive, our mind does the opposite. It wants the opposite. If I say you can't have a piece of cake, the rest of the day, your mind will say, I want cake. I really want cake. I really want cake. And it'll get worse. And our minds are kind of defiant like that. So this is why the average time frame that people fall off diets is 3 months. It's
Yeah.
not sustainable. And I wouldn't just say physically, because when you're depriving your body of a major nutrient that it needs, usually it's, they'll leave out something that you need. You can't sustain that physically, but mentally, you can't sustain that battle. You can't win that battle.
Yeah.
So you need to align the two, is what I always tell my clients. You got to align your mind and body, getting them working together, make them allies, best friends. And that's when everything syncs and starts to work together. That now it's going to be long term. And we
Mhm.
all want long term. Nobody wants a 3-month health diet, right?
Yeah.
No.
Well, and what we're hoping people can create is a lifestyle, not a
Yeah.
diet. I mean, I sometimes use the word diet not in a bad way, but like you are creating the diet that works for you. You're
Bingo.
creating a better way maybe to say it is a style of eating, a way of living and eating that you feel good. It limits the amount of symptoms, like if you know a headache is coming from food, if you know joint pain or things like that. And so it's a process of being curious. If you've got to be willing to be curious about what you're eating,
Yes.
I
I
think
like that.
Mhm.
Get curious. I'm a fan of that. Get curious, not just about your food, but about your body. As soon
Mhm.
as a symptom comes up, ooh, what is that from? Because I promise you, there's always a reason. Your body speaks in symptoms. So it's never accidental. Your body is telling you something. So just like you said, if you can get curious in those moments instead of, I'm going to take a pill so it goes away, because it's not going to go away permanently if we do that.
Yeah.
Right? So, oh, I have a headache. Why would I have a headache? Did I have enough water? How was my sleep last night? How am I managing my stress? How's my protein been?
Mhm.
And get curious. Self-check is what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. But you've got to be, it takes a level of willingness to look at it. So again, going back to the emotional side of eating, that if I believe I need this cup of coffee every morning, but maybe that coffee is creating the headache,
Mm,
am I willing to look at that and say, well, you know what? I'm not going to have it today.
mm,
Right. But then it's like, okay, why am I so stuck on I need that cup of coffee? Right. Like that's kind of what we're talking about, that being willing to get curious about it, I think is one of like the cornerstones to actually making those changes
yeah.
is to
And
be
then to make sure
willing.
there's no deprivation feelings for the psychological part,
Mm,
instead of just not having a coffee, replace it with something like green tea
mm-hmm,
or flavored sparkling water. Or because green tea has a little bit of caffeine, but it's not as much. So you're still getting a little kick, but it's so good for you. Or matcha tea, a little bit of coconut milk, and it's kind of like a latte then. So you're still filling that in, so it's not deprivation. You're getting the benefits of something else. You almost have to play this game with yourself. so you don't feel deprived. But get curious first. Get curious and then replace it with something.
Yeah. And yeah, and so it's not to let that um inner bull or don't, whatever that resistance is come out. It's like, what if I just try this for a couple days? Doesn't have to be forever.
Yeah.
Have to do this forever. Try it for a couple days and just see what happens. Kahiki, what else do you want people to really know about you or your philosophies about food, or what is something you think people really need to know about you?
Um, I think a lot of people don't realize I was not always in a state of health. Um, One of these times maybe we'll both show our before pictures. I don't know. But this is why we do what we do now. So I used to be 60 pounds overweight. I'm half Hawaiian, and I ate like a Hawaiian before I discovered nutrition. And at the time, I thought yo-yo dieting was the way. What kind of woke me up is I was only in my 20s. My metabolism slowed down about the time, and I gained the weight really fast. And I was distraught when I went to my favorite clothing store. This was very humbling. And I was so embarrassed that this was when I had that moment. It's like, I'm going to get it together. Was my favorite clothing store no longer carried my size. I got too big. I outgrew average size clothing. And then when I came out of that store, and this is after 3 employees looked in the back, not 1, 2, but 3 employees looked in the back to see if they could find the larger sizes, and they couldn't. So I was extra humiliated because 3 people had to tell me that.
Yeah.
And came out of that store, and I was like, I'm in my 20s. This isn't going to be the case. I'm too young for this path. So at the time, I thought yo-yo dieting was the way and kept gaining the weight back because nothing changed up here. So that's your set point, is what I always say. That's your set point. So that's dieting will work for so long, but if you change nothing here, you will revert. And that's what happened over and over. And it wasn't until I started to catch on to, as I started to study nutrition a little bit more on my own. And then when I decided to really take the leap in school and go to school for nutrition and made the change in school, I fell in love with it and I connected dots. I'm like, oh, I've been doing this wrong. I've been doing this deprivation style instead of nourishing my body, right? Which is really what it should have been about. And once I made that switch, then it was easier. It wasn't hard anymore because I just wanted to eat all the foods that I knew. Once you learn what those foods are doing in your body, it'll change how you look at food. It did for me anyway. So that's why I try to teach my clients from that level. I get nerdy a little bit, as Andrea knows, every time. I try to teach clients what's happening in their body when they eat these foods. So good or bad. So hopefully I inject some awareness before they reach for those foods, make them think twice when maybe they didn't before.
Yeah, I love that. And I respond to that kind of information, so that I love that you do that, because like if I understand how something is affecting me, it will help me make different choices. So I totally respond to that kind of learning. So I love that that's what you're trying to show people, not just, I mean, yes, some of the words coming out of your mouth are, this is better for you than this. But like, here's how, why, or here's what it's doing, or here's how to pay attention to what it's doing,
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. Our bodies are fascinating. This is why I knew I would be in this field. This is why initially I went into nursing.
Mm.
I loved physiology. I loved anatomy. I love biology. I love those classes still. So I knew I would be in that realm, and I still am. We are walking miracles. That's how I see us. I mean, if I wish everybody had gone through those classes so you could see what's happening in your body at all times. We are walking miracles. So if we can eat in a way that supports that process, we eat energy, we eat life. That's how we can feel.
Yeah, well, you just said it in a class we just taught together about like, I forget exactly how you phrased it though, about like we're meant to be healthy. I forget how
Yeah,
you said
that's
it.
our natural state,
Our natural
homeostasis.
state. Hmm.
Biology 101, homeostasis is our, and some people argue with me on that because, some lose cancer and they'll say, but so and so is completely healthy and they feel like they were blindsided and there was no explanation, but there's always a reason for the imbalance.
Hmm.
As much as it's hard for some people to hear that. Imbalances like that, like disease, don't happen overnight, number one.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of some kind of lifestyle factor over and over again to knock a body out of balance for that long.
And
So, yeah,
probably little things. There
yes.
were little hints along the way. I love what you said about like symptoms. And one of the books I studied in my very first nutrition class was the hidden message of cravings. And we're all
Ooh,
told like, oh, cravings are bad and you shouldn't, you're weak if you have cravings. It's like, no, the cravings are actual signals. Like the most common one that women talk about is craving chocolate. All right, it's probably because we need the magnesium in it
yeah,
at a certain time of our cycle, or we're craving, French fries or like deep fat, fatty things, or we're craving salt or there's a reason. It's just, it's not that we have a shortage of French fries in our body because we need a really good quality fat. We just don't always give it the thing it actually was asking for. But yeah, cravings are such an incredible message system
it
if
is.
you listen to them.
That's another one that we should talk about too on its own because and the symptoms, the way our body speaks to us, a lot of us are so disconnected from
Mm.
our body that we will tolerate symptoms, first of all, at all, but also much longer than we should have ever. There's a lot of clients when I sit in front of them, like I said, they're usually in a imbalance for a long time. So chronic diseases, right? Autoimmune cancer, for example. And I will ask them to revisit when they notice, and sometimes it's years ago when they notice their first symptom. And
Mhm.
I'll have to list symptoms for them because they'll have ignored these things for so long. And they'll say, oh, I didn't realize that was a symptom. Then that was been going on for years.
Yeah.
And then I'll have to connect the dots for them and say, that was your body speaking to you. Something was off, and the American diet is just such a diet of imbalance that those are the symptoms that are manifested in us. So the common person that's eating the common diet around here is going to experience the common imbalances as well. And so because it's common, they think the imbalances and those symptoms are common. So they're dismissed.
Yeah.
And I have to remind clients that is not common to have constant indigestion and bloat. It is not common to have constant freaking headaches and inflammation. It's not common or normal.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, reconnecting the dots.
Yeah. All right. Well, as always, I love these conversations with you. And I think
Definitely.
I think that was a really good introduction, like giving people an idea of who you are, I mean, we could go on for hours and hours. But I think that's a really great, introduction to why you do what you do, why I do what I do, and we'll keep having these conversations. So, to all those listening, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.